He was a conqueror, an artist, one of ancient India's most fascinating kings. But the story of Rudradaman I, it's not found in some grand book or epic poem. Nope, pretty much everything we know about him is carved right into a single massive rock. So let's go and explore the incredible legacy he left behind in stone.
Okay, so our story kicks off at Girnar Hill in Gujarat, with what might just look like a big old boulder. But this is no ordinary rock. It's basically a time capsule, a stone palimpsest where different layers of history are literally written right on top of each other. You could think of it as a kind of ancient billboard for power, one that was used by 3 different rulers from 3 totally different empires to tell the world, I was here.
And the time span this thing covers? It's just incredible. Way back around 250 BCE, you have the great Mauryan emperor Ashoka carving his moral edicts on it. Then, 400 years later, in 150 CE, our guy, Rudradaman I, makes his mark. And then another 300 years after that, the Gupta emperor Skandagupta adds his own record. That's almost 700 years of history on one single stone surface. Wild.
Now, we all know Ashoka and Skandagupta. They're giants of Indian history. But it's that inscription sandwiched right in the middle that represents this huge revolutionary shift. It was a total first of its kind. So what on earth did it say? And more importantly, who was this king Rudradaman who had the guts to write his own story right between 2 titans of history?
Well, to figure out who Rudradaman was, we have to go straight to the source, his own words. His inscription isn't just some boring political record. It's a biography, a resume, and a mission statement, all rolled into one and carved for eternity. So first, a little context is needed. Rudradaman wasn't actually from a native Indian dynasty. He was a Saka, part of an Indo-Scythian group from Central Asia who had set up a really powerful kingdom in Western India. They were known as the Western Kshatrapas. And in the power vacuum that the Mauryan Empire left behind, they became major players, always fighting for control with big rivals like the Satavahanas. And the inscription? It paints this amazing picture of the man. It tells us he earned the title Great Satrap not just because of who his family was, but through his own skill and courage. The guy was a true polymath, a master of music, grammar, and logic. And he was a complete warrior, an expert in every kind of combat you can imagine. The text even claims he was so handsome that princesses were lining up to choose him as a husband. I mean, he was basically presented as a true Renaissance man of the ancient world. All right, so we've got this brilliant, charismatic leader, but what did he actually do with all that power? Well, he went out and forged an empire. Let's take a look at his military wins and the really complex politics of his time. The inscription gives us a detailed map of his kingdom, and he's boasting about controlling this huge chunk of Western and Central India. We're talking from Sindh in the northwest, all the way down to the Konkan coast, and deep into Malwa in central India. Rudradaman took back territories that had been lost and seriously expanded his kingdom's influence, making himself the undisputed ruler of the entire region. And this is where you see just how tangled ancient politics could be. Rudradaman's biggest rivals were the Satavahanas. The inscription says he beat their king Satakarni twice in a fair fight, but he didn't kill him. And why not? Because, as the inscription puts it, of the nearness of their connection. Turns out Rudradaman's own daughter was married to the Satavahana prince. His greatest enemy was also his son-in-law. It just goes to show you he was a fierce warrior, for sure, but also a really clever diplomat who used marriage to manage his rivalries. But, maybe the most telling story about Rudradaman isn't about war at all. It's about building something. The whole reason for this epic inscription was to celebrate one single, massive act of public service, rebuilding the Sudarshana Lake. And this wasn't just any old lake. The Sudarshana, which means beautiful to behold, was this ancient, vital piece of infrastructure. It was first built way back in the time of Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the Mauryan Empire, and later improved by his grandson Ashoka. For centuries, it was the absolute lifeblood of the region, super critical for farming and for the people who live there. Then, in the year 150 CE, total disaster. A massive storm, described in terrifying detail on the rock, just rips the dam apart. The water drains out, and the once beautiful Sudarshana became, in a very clever play on words, a Durdarshana, or ugly to look at. His own ministers told him to just forget it. The project was too big, too expensive. But Rudradaman overruled them. For the good of his people, he decided to take on this immense task himself. So how did he pay for this colossal project? The inscription is very clear about it. He rebuilt the whole thing, making it stronger than ever, by spending a great amount of money from his own treasury. And this is the key part. He didn't burden his people with new taxes or forced labor. The message was loud and clear. A good king takes care of his subjects, even if it costs him personally. Now, that act alone would have been enough to cement his legacy. But Rudradaman did something else on that rock, something that would end up influencing Indian culture for hundreds of years. And it all came down to the language he chose to write his story in.
Just think about it. Ashoka's edicts, carved 400 years earlier on that same rock, were in Prakrit, which was the common everyday language, so everybody could read it. But Rudradaman, he chose classical Sanskrit. Right there, on the very same stone, you can see this dramatic cultural shift playing out, from the language of the people to the formal poetic language of the elite court.
And that was a huge deal. This is considered the very first major royal inscription written entirely in classical Sanskrit. And for a king who came from a foreign background, this was a massive statement. It showed how deeply he had integrated into Indian high culture. He basically elevated Sanskrit to the language of power and prestige. And he set a standard that future dynasties, like the Great Guptas, would all follow.
So after all this time, what are the big takeaways from this one incredible stone record? Let's quickly sum up the lasting legacy of Rudradaman I.
Okay, number 1, he was a seriously powerful conqueror who built a massive empire. 2, he was a master politician, juggling war and diplomacy like a pro. 3, he was a ruler who actually cared and saw public projects as his duty. 4, he was a cultural trendsetter who changed the official language of Indian royalty. And finally, number 5, his inscription is an absolute keystone for historians, giving us this rare, detailed glimpse into the politics, life, and even the weather of his time. Which brings us to one last thought. Without this single rock, what would we know about Rudradaman? He might just be a name on a few old coins, his incredible story completely lost to time. It's a really powerful reminder of just how fragile history can be, and how one voice, if it's carved deeply enough into stone, can echo for thousands of years, telling a story of power, duty, and a legacy that just refused to be forgotten.